أعوذ بالله السميع العليم من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله الذي هدانا لهذا وما كنا لنهتدي لولا أن هدانا الله والحمد لله الذي جعلني من أمتي سيد المرسلين خاتم النبيين طه وياسين أحمد محمود أبو القاسم محمد
اللهم صل على محمد
ومن المحبين عترة الطاهرين لعنة الدائمين من الآن إلى يوم الدين على أعدائهم أما بعد قال الله سبحانه وتعالى في كتابه المجيد وفرقانه الحميد وقوله الحق بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم قل هل ننبئكم بالأكثرين أعمالا الذين ضل سعيهم في الحياة الدنيا وهم يحسبون أنهم يحسنون صنعا. صلوات. Mu'minin, just to recap, the last two majalises, the subject covered was one of time and one of loss. And who are those losers? The ayah that I began with, to reiterate the translation, that shall we show you the losers, those whose efforts in the affairs of this world have been unsuccessful. And what is more, Allah is reminding them, is that they think that they are doing good deeds. This is indeed something that one needs to reflect upon. And we talked about the idea of tahqiq and taqleed yesterday, on the basis that unless there is critical thinking, unless one reflects upon one's actions, one may be amongst those losers who thinks he's very successful, but indeed he is under a delusion because he is in a state of loss. And yesterday, due to time constraints, I wanted to finish on this note, but I will begin because it's the majlis of Abu Abdullah, and beginning or end, as long as it is the message of justice, message of humanity, there is no beginning, there is no end. But the idea of moving people from the idea of from compound ignorance towards simple ignorance so that we become critical thinkers becomes all so much more important, particularly for a school of thought that thrives on its intellectual legacy of Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salam. When you look at the khutbah in the Nahjul Balagha, everyone can draw the inference. And many a times when Mawla was asked a question, he would not say this way or that way. He would invite people to think. At the time of Jamal, he was asked, Mawla, who is on the side of the truth? We see Aisha and we see Talha and Zubair, who were the best companions of the Blessed Prophet, and you on different sides. Ya Ali, tell us, where does the truth lie? Mawla could have said, the truth lies with me. He did not. He tells the man that you have got yourself involved, I'm paraphrasing, but you have got yourself involved in a very obtuse argument and an obtuse discussion in your head. You are so confused. He said, you do not determine truth by personalities. It's the other way around. turn it over. First understand where the truth is, and then establish whether Ali is with the truth or the others are with the truth. This is the school of intellect. This is a school of thinking. And this is indeed something that we need to do. So the idea of moving people on this path from compound ignorance, which is you don't know that you don't know, to a level of saying, at least I now know that I don't know, is a huge step. And this member, this podium, this Azza, Farsh Azza that we have is meant to do exactly that, to move us from compound ignorance to a level of simple ignorance. Because the member is not going to give you all the answers in the time that it has got. And the level of comprehension and understanding of different people. The member is here. The Farsh Azza is here for us to continue to think, Mu'mineen. And the more you learn, it's like when you imagine a circle, a small circle, which represents what you know, the circumference is the boundary of what you don't know. Please be with me in this imagery. That this circle is what you know, and the circumference around the circle is the boundary of what you know and what you don't know. Imagine now, the bigger the circle becomes, the more you know. But you know what? The circumference becomes even bigger, that what you don't know becomes even bigger. This is the beauty of knowledge. And indeed, Walji IJAMiami was a great scholar. And he understood the value of knowing and not knowing. Yesterday, Maulana talked about Ayatollah Burujardi. That he said, when he did not know, to say, I do not know. The point is, Walji IJAMiami was once asked by a senior lady in the town, and she asked him a question. Being a great scholar that he was, he had no shame in admitting that I don't know the answer to the question you have asked, oh mother. And you know, when our seniors get angry, they do get angry. They get very, very excited. And she said, mother, she said to him, oh Walji, the king pays you so much. You're in the employ of the king. The king pays you so much. And you don't know the answer to a question from a simple old lady like me. The answer that Walji gives should be recorded in golden letters in our history. Walji said, mother, the king pays me for what I know. The king pays me for what I know. If the king were to pay me for what I do not know, his entire kingdom could be sold and he could still not pay me for what I do not know. In terms of how much knowledge that exists. So, Mu'mineen, this is the value, this was the note that I wanted to sign off on yesterday, to say it's so important to understand the value of knowledge, so that we, the lovers of the Ahlul Bayt alayhi salam, from where the fountainhead of knowledge has emerged, through the progeny of the Blessed Prophet of Islam sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. It is this, that we should not be in a state of loss and be under a delusion that we are doing good deeds when we stop thinking critically, Mu'mineen, salawat. Well, to connect that particular lesson that we had yesterday in terms of using one's time and thinking critically, if these two things are combined, and the first two lectures were a preamble to this, what I'm going to be talking about today, is to live a life with a purpose. To live a life when you make contribution to a society. Because a human being has been endowed with the best of qualities. In the khutbah of Bibi Sakina that Maulana recited yesterday, The term used was ahsani taqweem, the best of molds. Surah At-Tin, لَقَدْ خَلَقْنَا الْإِنسَانَ فِي أَحْسَنِ تَقْوِيمٍ ثُمَّ رَدَدْنَاهُ أَسْفَلَ سَافِلِينَ. That we have indeed created man in the best of molds, in the best of shapes, and then we turned him towards all the lowest of the low states. So here are the parameters which are being given for those who imbibe knowledge, those who have been blessed with aql, the intellect that we have been blessed with. Malai Muttaqiyan Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salam said that man, a human being, shares one quality with the angels, which is aql, quwwa aqaliyah, and he shares two other qualities with animals, which is quwwa shahawiyah and quwwa ghadabiyah. Quwwa aqaliyah is the faculty of intellect. Quwwa shahawiyah are the desires, the carnal desires, the desire to possess. You know, human being, when the human being is born, if there's a gynecologist here, he will bear me out or she will bear me out, that the gynecologist will not pronounce a baby alive until the baby screams. When the baby screams, that's when the baby is alive, which means the baby is screaming that I have come to take. Main lene ke liye aaya hu. That is the beginning to say I must take. Whether if I get it through halal, I will take it through halal. If I don't, then I'll use other means. But my fitra is to take. So the idea is that when one goes on this basis to say, as a human being, this is quwwa shahawiyah, this faculty of taking, the faculty of carnal desires, and quwwa ghadabiyah, the faculty of anger, ferociousness. Mawla said a human being shares these two with the animals. And going on from the subject that Maulana hinted upon yesterday, to say that a human being can be the best of the best. And he may say, do not insult me by comparing me with angels, because I am better. Why? Because a human being is better than an angel, can be better than an angel, because having possessed the faculty of ghazab and shaw, the faculty of carnal desires, the faculty for his nafs ammara to take him wherever, he has controlled himself and therefore he has moved. He is better than a farishta and an angel. But having been given that aql by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and then if he is going to be driven through his nafs ammara with his quwwa ghadabiyah and quwwa shahawiyah towards the other end, then having possessed the aql, a donkey will say, do not compare me with this fasik and fajir, because he had aql. He had the intellect to control himself. He did not. I am somebody who lives on my fitrah. A donkey does not commit a sin. A donkey lives on its fitrah. A human being has those qualities, and therefore this ayah is telling us to say we have created you, insan, in the best of forms. Ahsani taqweem. And then you can turn towards the lowest of the low states. And this is the meaning of saying, with my aql, I have used my 86,400 seconds that I have in a day in a useful way, so that my life becomes a life with a purpose. Mu'mineen, salawat. We are told, وَمَا خَلَقْتَ الْجِنَّ وَالْإِنسِ إِلَّا لِيَعْبُدُونَ, that human beings and jinn have been created for the primary purpose of ibadah. Generally, and I said this yesterday, English is a very poor language. To translate ibadah as worship is to shortchange the concept of ibadah. Truly, when we reflect upon it, it is assumed to be ritual religious acts, while ibadah is actually to obey the Creator in whichever way the Creator wants me to be, for however long the Creator wants me to be. So how long should that obedience be, mu'mineen? If every breath that I take is a ni'mah from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then what should my level of obedience be? Which second should it be in my life where I should be disobeying him? This is the meaning of ibadah. Does that mean that we sit in a mosque and breathe like some of the Gnostics and the Sufis do to do zikr with my kashkul in my hand? If ever we did that, the society would not work. The idea is that ibadah needs to be understood through critical thinking of saying that this is in obedience to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Secondly, it needs to be done with ikhlas, niyyah, which is a foundation of one's ibadah. When you say qurbatan ila Allah, before any ritual act that we begin, mu'mineen, the entire life must be a qurbatan ila Allah. One begins one's day and say, this is for seeking nearness to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, qurbatan ila Allah. You begin your day with that thought in your mind. And I was discussing this with Naushad Bhai a couple of days ago. You begin your day with a good thought. You begin your day to say, I am going to be obedient to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I am trying to seek His qurbah. Then you can see where your day will lead you. Every act must be reflective. And when we talk about aql, that we talked about yesterday, it is that aql. Maulana gave a great example of a car driver. If you are intoxicated, the car is in control of you. If you are intoxicated with the world and you are driving, the world is in charge of you. If you are not, then you are in charge of the car. And Ustad Naraki in Jami Saada gives a wonderful example, which is very similar. And he said, imagine, and stay with me, Mu'mineen, just for a few seconds. Imagine a horse, a rider, a donkey, a rider on a horse, not a donkey, I apologize, somehow the donkey is in my head for whatever reason. A dog that is following. And this man is going, this rider is going. And he gives this example to say that as long as the rider is in control of the horse and the dog is following that rider and is following its commands, then the journey of life will be successful. What does he mean? When he talks about the different quwwas, the quwwa aqaliyah, the quwwa wahmiyah, which is another one which I don't want to introduce at this point in time, but that's the faculty of imagination where art and everything else that a man can create can come. This is quwwa wahmiyah. But quwwa aqaliyah is the intellect, quwwa shahawiyah and quwwa ghadabiyah. The horse is your quwwa shahawiyah. And the dog is your quwwa ghadabiyah. If the dog is going to bark at the wrong time, it will turn a friend away. But a dog needs to bark at the right time so that an enemy is turned away. That is your quwwa ghadabiyah, to say that you must show your anger, you must show your resistance to an unjust act. That is being, or you are being oppressed and you stand up. That is what Karbala is all about. The idea of standing up. When we say quwwa ghadabiyah, it doesn't mean anger in the normal sense of the word. It's a faculty which protects a human being. The dog is that. And you have the horse. The horse is your quwwa shahawiyah. If you let the horse loose, the horse can go anywhere. But as long as the rider, which is quwwa aqaliyah, is in control, then that life's journey would indeed move forward smoothly in obedience to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And this, mu'mineen, is the idea of what we call a holistic concept of ibadah, where it emphasizes reflective thinking, it emphasizes critical thinking. For me to understand how to pray 4 rakat of namaz from my teacher in madrasa, who has got that from his teacher, and the masala has been obtained from the mujtahideen, is correct because that is taqleed. But by praying 4 rakat namaz ritualistically is not going to make me understand who I am praying to. And unless I have that reflective thinking, and therefore the concept of ibadah is comprehensive, it is holistic. On the one hand, we think in terms of ibadah as fulfilling Allah's rights upon us. And that is cardinal, that is fundamental, which is what we call huququllah. And I have inferred to that in the past lectures. But there is also another dimension, that while fulfilling one's obligation to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in terms of our ibadah, in terms of being obedient to Him, there is also an obligation towards our fellow beings, which is what we need to understand as huququl ibad, the rights of the creatures of Allah upon me. And fulfillment of both huququllah and huququl ibad must be integrated in one's life, so that our ibadah becomes part and parcel of us living a purposeful life here and for the hereafter. The purpose of faith, the purpose of madhab, the purpose of deen, and all these words have very specific meanings. In the time that's allotted, one cannot go through, but when you use these words, what is it? Firstly, it's to help, to instruct, and to practice first in terms of worshipping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Also to inspire and to promote love and justice in a society. The idea of the rights of God's creatures, huququl ibad, are as important as the rights of Allah upon us, because these are the creatures. Indeed, the Blessed Prophet has said, and I quote, to strive, Biharul Anwar, volume 74, page 311, to strive for the fulfillment of a Muslim's need is better than circumambulating around the Kaaba 70 times. This is something that one needs to reflect upon. That does not mean that we do not circumambulate around the Kaaba 70 times. Indeed, we should. But this is being given the parameter and the yardstick of the importance of huququl ibad, and this is what means to live a life with a purpose. It is not just passing time in the world. It is not just passing year, seconds that you have been blessed with, because this life is very short. Sheikh Saduq says in Ikmaluddin, he gives a beautiful example, a metaphor as to how fleeting and brief the life is. He said, imagine, if you will, and I love these parables from our ulama because these are so reflective, they allow us to reflect upon it. And he says, imagine a deep, dark well, and imagine a pulley on that well. Imagine a pail, a bucket going down the well, and imagine, he says, a rope that is going down that pulley into the well through that bucket to get water. This is how people get water even today. I've just been back from India. We still use wells in some places. Our children may perhaps can never imagine what it means to picking up water from a well. And how do you put it on your head and take it 3 miles out there? I was in Kerala and actually saw that happen. But this pail is going down, this bucket is going down, and there is a black mouse and a white mouse sitting at the tip of the pulley, chipping away at the rope that is going down into the pulley, into the well. And he said on the side of the well, as the pulley is going down, you can see a nice beehive with a lot of honey oozing out of that beehive. And he said, imagine this, the black and the white mice are day and night. They're chipping away at the rope, which is your life. And it is you in that bucket that is going down the deep well to your sure death. And while they are picking away at that rope, the black and white mice, Mu'minin, whenever you remember dunya, remember the black and white mice, it'll give you a wake-up call. And he said that as the person is going down, or as that pail is going down, he sees this beautiful beehive with honey oozing from it. He said that honey is dunya. That honey is the love of this life. There is no harm. Islam does not say that you live like a pauper. He said live with whatever means that you can afford in a halal way. But do not have so much craving. He gave the same example yesterday. In terms of Radha Krishna's kashkul that he was going around with. That do not be so attached to the worldly things. But remember the black and the white mouse. That they are chipping away, the day and night is chipping away every day. And it's how thin that nobody knows when that rope is going to break, when that lifeline is going to break. And therefore, the idea is to live a life which indeed is a purposeful life. Now, we have heard many times in terms of hukukullah, and rightly so, that is for this member. It is a right of this member. It is a right of the one who sits on this member to remind us of our duty toward Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. At the same time, the member also reminds us equally in terms of living a purposeful life, and again a simile where we had a student, a brilliant student of a great teacher, and he goes back to his village, and after a while the teacher goes back to the village to say, let me see how my student is faring. Teachers have that special pride in their good students, in their prize star students. And when the teacher goes to the village, he doesn't find the student in the village amongst the people. And the people says, the student that you have, he's such a pious person. He does not want any of the dunya. He doesn't want any participation in the society. Maybe, he was too tired of the local politics and whatever, everything that happens in every society. So he said he has secluded himself in this small place outside the village, and we hardly ever see him. He is in his ibadah, he is in his zikr all the time. The teacher goes to visit him. And he asked him to say, what have you done with your life? He said, I came back and I feel so spiritually fulfilled. And the teacher said, but that is not what I taught you. That is not what I taught you. He said, you haven't understood the message. I taught you faith. Where is the faith? And he said, please, pray, explain to me. This is my faith. This is my spirituality. This is my zikr that I do all the time. I recite the Quran. I ponder upon a hadith. I go and do all these things, and I stay away from the pollution of the world. If this was modern times, perhaps as my teacher told me once, to say you try and do that, become a recluse, is saying that I've never had a parking ticket in my life. And if somebody asked you, do you drive? You said, no, I don't drive. Well, you won't get a parking ticket. If you go out of life, you won't be polluted. But the teacher told him something much more profound. And he said, imagine, there are two ways, and Mu'min is a wonderful lesson in terms of service to one's community, to humanity, to the world at large. And he said there are two ways in the winter of keeping warm. One is, like you have done, you wear a thick coat and you'll be protected. That's one way of keeping warm in the winter. But another way, a better way, is to light a fire. You light a fire so that everybody who sits around that fire gets the warmth. That is the work of you, my student. That is what I expected you to do, not to be a recluse in a place where you say, I want to be away from the world. Salawat. So, Mu'mineen, this is what we call living a purposeful life where one is reflective, that beyond the rituals, there is something else. And it reminds me of a couplet by Allama Iqbal. When a masjid was made Shaheed fell down in Lahore, he said these words, that Masjid to banadi shabbar mein. In one night they erected the whole mosque in their fervor. Masjid to banadi shabbar mein, iman ki hararat walon ne. Masjid to banadi shabbar mein, iman ki hararat walon ne. मन अपना पुराना पापी है बरसों में नमाजी बन न सके. The idea of that ibadah to say, yes, we will create a mosque. But if your heart is not amongst those who pray, then, well, I have paraphrased. Forgive me, Maulana, for this paraphrase. But I have paraphrased, and forgive me, Mominin, that farsh azaa to bichha di, फर्श अज़ा तो बिछा दी पल भर में, फर्श अज़ा तो बिछा दी पल भर में हुसैन पे रोने वालों ने, फर्श अज़ा तो बिछा दी पल भर में हुसैन पे रोने वालों ने, गिरिया तो हमें इनके रोने पे है जो बरसों में हुसैनी बन न सके. If we have not understood the concept of Bibi Zainab Salamullahi alayha in the manner, in the compassion that she showed all along the way, if we have not understood the basis in which the Blessed Prophet of Islam sallallahu alayhi wa sallam was able to tilt those balances of injustice towards the level of justice, towards the Medina society in terms of how a society behaves, then what have we understood? This, mu'mineen, is the idea of basic human rights, dignity, equality, and freedom. These are the values that we aspire to. Islam has been given a bad rap by those who have misunderstood that this is not a faith of oppression, this is not a faith of killing, this is not a faith where you subjugate others, this is a faith where the Blessed Prophet said, Kulu la ilaha illallah tuflihu, say la ilaha illallah so that you may be delivered, so that you may achieve falah. Mu'minin, this is the basis of achieving that deliverance, even environmentally. The earth has its rights and needs to be respected. Misuse of the earth's resources. We have prophetic sayings in terms of do not pluck a leaf or a flower if it is not needed. Animals too have their rights. And of course we have the best of the legacies, which is Risalatul Hukuk, a charter of responsibilities from Imam Zainul Abidin alayhi salam. I invite every person, particularly my young friends, read the Charter of Human Responsibilities, Risalatul Hukuk, by our Imam. If only the United Nations or the League of Nations at that time had understood, and instead of calling it the Charter of Human Rights, if we had called it and understood it the other way, to say that we must first establish a charter of human responsibilities before we establish a charter of human rights, because before I demand my rights, reflective thinking, critical thinking means that I must first give whatever my obligations and my responsibilities are. It can be to humanity, it can be to a society, it can be to this organization. Before I expect the volunteer here to make sure that the light is on, before I expect that this fush has been laid nicely in the places, either warm or cold, whatever the season may be, I must also see to it that as an individual, have I discharged my obligations. That is the meaning of critical thinking and living in a reflective state of ibadah, mu'mineen. This is what it is. It is not just a ritual. The prayers that we do, if we were to understand the principle for which I stand up and say Allahu Akbar, if I could only be reflective on this, then it becomes much more. In terms of how we should behave in a society, I would like to share a conversation between Imam Jafar as-Sadiq alayhi salam And a muhib, a companion, a friend, a lover, a follower of Imam, a Shia. He calls himself a Shia. And he said, I am your Shia. And Imam says, how were your brothers when you took leave of them? Imam is asking about this place, the distant place where his lovers live. And the man says, they are very good people. They remember you a lot. They do all their ibadah. They are Shias. So Imam says, let me ask you a few questions. And he says, do the rich visit the indigent when they fall ill? And the man says, they seldom do. He said, do the rich seek to know the condition of those who are poor? Oh, they say they rarely do that. He said, do the affluent ones help out the poor and the needy? And he kept on asking the questions. Finally, the man capitulated and said, Ibn Rasulullah, you speak of attributes which are rare amongst our people. And Imam says, how do these people then consider themselves to be our Shia? I mean, these are the teachings of Aimma alayhi salam. And the idea of that unity of purpose, let me remind ourselves that there is one common gain, one common loss for all of us. Why? Because it's one Prophet for all, one Iman for all, one Kaaba, one Allah, and one Quran for all. How great would it be if the Muslims were also one? Those who know Urdu poetry and the master of Urdu poetry know that I am quoting none other than Allama Iqbal when he says, Manfaat ek hai is qaum ki, nuksan bhi ek. Manfaat ek hai is qaum ki, nuksan bhi ek. Ek hi sabka nabi, deen bhi, iman bhi ek, haram pak bhi, Allah bhi, Quran bhi ek. Kuch badi baat hoti, hote jo Musliman bhi ek. The idea of developing a community which is an intentional society, and I'll end on this note, inshallah, we'll continue tomorrow, is the day of Arba'in. Tonight is the eve of Arba'in. We need to remember the Shuhada and their plight. But this is an intentional society where the members of that society share their duties and responsibilities together because their fortunes and wherever they are going is going to be shared. Their destination is one. Otherwise, it's just an accidental society, which is where people sit in a plane next to each other, maybe make some small talk. All their goal is to get to the destination ultimately. There is no interaction. There are no laws. There is nothing apart from common courtesies. That's an accidental society. We, the Ummah of the Blessed Prophet, we, those who are the lovers of Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam, have a much bigger duty that this must be, our societies must be what we call those intentional societies, where there are these values that we are taught in Karbala, the values of social justice, the value of humanity, the idea of encompassing that my ibadah is also looking after not just my immediate family, but those around me, and the concentric circles do not only stop. The concentric circles do not just stop at my own community, they go on to say to serve the entire humanity. Otherwise, Mawlai Muttaqiyan Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salam would not have said this to Malik Ashtar when he was going. We know this. We know this is oft quoted. Part of the instruction to Malik Ashtar when he was going to Misr. To say when you go there, you will find two kinds of people. You will have your brethren in faith, and you will have your equals in creation. Serve them well with equal justice. This is the plurality. This is the universalism of our faith. This is Mu'minin, our pedigree. This is our legacy, and it becomes all the more important for the young men and women in this community who are now well versed with the ways of this country and this nation. We are what you call immigrants, third generation, second generation. Now you have natives who are born here and who have been bred here. It becomes upon them to continue to spread this message of the Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam. This is the basis of Tabligh, to say that Islam, and in terms of the school of Ahlul Bayt Islam can be a civilizing force for this entire world, and we are here to demonstrate as to how it can be such a civilizing force. And this is what our faith is. Salawat. Mu'mineen, the best, the greatest, and the most perfect example of that humanity, and at every stage we find that in Karbala. To establish the supremacy of the highest human values, without which no human society can survive in progress, were indeed shown in Karbala. And this is the legacy of Aqilatu Bani Hashim in terms of seeking justice, to cooperate with each other. وَتَعَاوَنُوا عَلَى الْبِرِّ وَالتَّقْوَى وَلَا تَعَاوَنُوا عَلَى الْإِثْمِ وَالْعُدْوَانِ. The idea is cooperate with each other onto that which leads to goodness and righteousness, not arrogance and sin. This is the common ground, and this was the message of Karbala in terms of how this caravan of Islah, this was the caravan. We say it was a caravan of tears. Indeed it was. But when Imam sets out, he said, I'm going out for the Islah of the community of my grandfather and my father. That was the idea of Islah. And this caravan, through its travels and through its tribulations, is at a point when it now reaches Damascus, covering a distance of almost 1,400 kilometers. Imagine covering 1,400 kilometers. Mu'mineen, let's put this into context. We hear this, but do we understand the context? In fact, the response of the people in various towns and cities, Yazid's idea was to ensure that people understood his victory. But the khutbah, we heard the khutbahs, and inshallah we'll hear more. The speeches, the sermons, the actions of the Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam. Once they learned the real identity of the captives and the martyrs, it compelled Yazid's men to divert this caravan through a desert which was full of thorns and avoided populated areas. Yazid's defeat already began when this caravan was going on. And then Yazid, anticipating the arrival of this caravan, had declared the entire thing as holiday, and crowds were coming in. Mu'mineen, inshallah, we will hear in detail in Urdu in terms of what really happened. For me, it is just to recount a few moments to say that to set the scene, to say from the time when Imam Hussein al-Islam fell in the battlefield, Bibi Sakina had forgotten to smile. And then came a time when the earth shook and Sakina becomes an orphan. And then Kufa sees her as a somber little girl lost in thought. Quite often she would sit up at night, and when asked if she wanted anything, she would say, I just heard a baby cry. Is it Ali Asghar? Maybe he's calling out for me. And Mu'mineen, from the roofless dungeons in Sham, Bibi Sakina watched those birds flying, and she asked innocently where the birds were flying. Bibi Zainab replied that they were going back to their homes, yearning to go back home. Bibi Sakina cried bitterly, alas, alas, when the Kafila leaves Damascus, when the Kafila leaves Sham, Bibi Sakina was no more. Mu'mineen, just to move through. When they reach Iraq, they said that they wanted to be guided, to take the highway, to take the road leading to Karbala. And when they reach this place where Imam Hussein had been martyred, who do they find? Mu'mineen, they find Jabir ibn Abdullah Ansari, who stands by the grave when they hear him to say, when he's calling out the name of Al-Hussein. And Jabir says, why? A loved one does not answer the one who loves him. And then Jabir replies to his own question, and he says, how can he answer while his cheeks are torn and his head is separated from his body? Mu'mineen, final words to say that when the ladies of Imam Hussein's family saw the graves of their dear ones, they fell on one from the camels and overcome with grief and sorrow. Bibi Zainab walked straight towards the grave of Imam Hussein alayhi salam. Layla fell on the grave of Ali Akbar. Farwa soon on the tomb of Qasim, while Rabab placed the tiny grave of her infant Ali Asghar. Mu'mineen, this was the return. This was the return, the final words of Bibi Zainab. She goes and says, oh my beloved brother Hussein, look, Zainab has come. Will you not stand to greet your sister? Oh Hussein, I have come to the streets of Kufa, the bazaars of Sham. Oh Hussein, this sister of yours whose shadow had not been seen by any na-mahram has been taken without a veil amongst thousands of people. Oh my brother, will you not wake up and ask me about my journey? Oh my beloved brother, I have returned to you without Sakina, whom you had entrusted to my care, and this is all I have left of your daughter Sakina. And she holds out the earrings of me, Sakina. Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un. Al-Fatiha.